make a profit for them because they're just not going to let you farm it for free. The way I got into farming is that I was actually born into it. I'm a fifth generation farmer. That means that there were 4 previous generations of Griggs that farmed this ground before I had the opportunity to do it. Simon Hancock asked, how much profit do you think farmers make? I can't speak to how much farmers make, but I can tell you how much we made over the last few years. In 2023, we had a gross income of $1.83 million on our farm. Now, of that gross, $72,000 of that was profit. That doesn't necessarily mean that $72,000 goes in my pocket and me and my wife can go take a nice fancy vacation. The vast majority of that $72,000 remained in the business to invest in the next year, whether it's purchasing seed, chemicals, and fertilizer for the next year or making needed investments in equipment. In 2024, our gross income dropped to $1.65 million, and of that, there was no profit. In fact, we actually wound up losing $300,000 worth of profit, and that was even after the government subsidies that we received. Now, why do we have such a decreasing gross revenue last year? Well, right here is an ear of corn that we harvested last year. That's not a very impressive ear of corn. Our yields were devastated by long extreme drought, and we had lower yields across the board. Even though we had depressed commodity prices and lower yields, our input costs, the costs we pay for our seeds, our fertilizer, and the chemicals, were actually up due to inflation. Now, looking at 2025, we're still dealing with what's projected to be lower commodity prices and relatively high input prices. But if we can return to more of a normal year, if we avoid the drought, we're set to gross hopefully $1.51 million. And through extreme cost-cutting measures that we've taken this winter, hopefully at the end of the year, we will net about $36,000 worth of profit. Gabriel asks, why do farmers always need subsidies? Subsidies are necessary because farming is extremely expensive, but it's also very necessary for the survival of society. We can't control the prices that we receive from commodities. We also can't control the weather. In my opinion, the American taxpayer actually gets a return on its investment because farming subsidies actually ensure that there is a very bountiful, cheap supply of food in the store. See, subsidies keep a lot of farmers in business. You keep farmers in business, well, there's more competition. There's more competition to produce more and more so that you can remain in business. An abundant food supply leads to a cheaper food supply. Now, there's a wide array of subsidies that can be paid to farmers, like the crop insurance that we purchase to help ensure that we don't go out of business when we experience a loss. The crop insurance premium is subsidized by the federal government. If we experience a disaster year, there might be a disaster payment. In the event of a disaster, it's very unlikely that any subsidy money will cover our losses for that year. Joe II asks, what's the purpose of this dried out corn that's going to be harvested? Like, what do they do with it? Well, Joe, there's a whole lot of different uses for that corn. The vast majority of corn you see growing out in the fields is what we call field corn or den corn. It's not the type that you eat off the cob, but the field corn that we grow is used for so many other purposes. 10% of the gas that you put in your car actually came from corn. It's called ethanol. Do you happen to like Mexican food? It's used in tortilla shells and many other ingredients. Do you like cornbread? It's in there also. One of the biggest uses for corn is high fructose corn syrup, a sweetener that's used in many of the products you can buy in your grocery store, especially soft drinks. Benji Tunes asks, how big of an issue is soil erosion and what can we do about it? Is there anywhere it's particularly bad? Soil erosion is a huge problem. We have erosion caused by water running across the land and removing soil particles, but there's also wind erosion. One of the worst examples of wind erosion was actually the Dust Bowl of the 1930s when the Midwest was impacted by severe drought. Now, the Midwest was natively a grasslands, and the grass helped anchor the soil and hold it into place. However, when you plowed the soil, it destroyed all of those native grasses and loosened the soil up. And then when drought came in the 1930s, it was very susceptible to wind erosion because the Midwest gets a lot of high winds. And when you have a bunch of loose, dry soil particles on the surface, the wind can pick it up and sweep it away. But here in the hills of Tennessee, erosion is a huge concern because we have hillsides funneling water into certain locations that can easily wash away the soil. Now, farming has come a long way from the Dust Bowls of the 1930s. We now have the technology called no-till. That means that we're planting and maintaining our crops without ever plowing the soil. If we're not disturbing the soil has a whole lot less chance of being eroded away. It is our goal to have a living plant growing on our ground 12 months out of the year. That means that the raindrops that are falling are not actually impacting the soil and dislodging soil particles. It's hitting the plant material first and then gets down to the soil. The roots actually help to hold the soil together, really minimizing the impact of erosion. We harvest only about 4 to 5 months out of the year. That's 7 to 8 months that we don't have a crop that we're going to grow. So we fill that void by planting what we call any plant or a mixture of types of plants that we actually seed into the ground to grow and anchor the soil and protect it against erosion for the fall and winter months until we get ready to plant our next cash crop. Hoot McNoot asked, I wonder how farmers keep pests, diseases, and unwanted critters away from their crops. There are pesticides that we use to kill insects or to prevent disease. However, there's other ways other than using chemicals to minimize damage to your fields, and a lot of these are referred to as cultural practices. For example, to help minimize disease in our field, we try to rotate our crops every year. We might plant corn this year, and then the following year we'll plant cotton, and then the following year we'll plant soybeans, and what we're doing is we're breaking the disease cycle because a lot of these diseases will only attack one specific crop. In our area, deer is a big problem, but they favor certain types of crops, especially soybeans. Now, there are ways to kind of help minimize that, and one of those ways is by allowing hunters onto your farm during the hunting season to help thin out the population some. But farmers have learned to accept that there will be a certain level of damage to their crops year after year after year. Tony Carrasco asks, how is soil replenished in farming fields? The matter that the plant consists of comes from the soil. When parts of these plants are removed for usage, that implies a matter deficit in this field. So isn't the field supposed to reseed with every harvest? There are certain things that the plant needs to take out of the soil in order to produce the crop. And if these nutrients are not replenished, plants will naturally deplete the soil of these nutrients. Now, that's really not going to cause the soil level to drop because a 6-inch depth of soil across an acre weighs about 2 million pounds. Well, an acre of corn might pull out 200 pounds of
can get from City Hall to the factory with the key I just gave you.
Nitrogen, 70, 80, 90 pounds of phosphorus, a little bit less than that of potassium, and those are going to be the major nutrients that the plant uptakes. All of these nutrients will be replaced with fertilizer. So while crops are pulling something out of the soil, it's in relatively low amount, and it's not going to cause the soil to recede year after year of growing crops. We got a question from Explain Like I'm Five Reddit. How do farmers water their fields? If it doesn't rain, are they just screwed over for the year? Basically, if it doesn't rain, yeah, we are screwed over for the year for the most part. However, some farmers do have the ability to irrigate their fields to be able to supply supplemental water to a crop in a growing season. Now, on our farm, we don't practice any irrigation because we generally don't need it. In our climate, we receive approximately 52 inches of rainfall every year. However, as you move out west, it's a lot more arid environment, and irrigation is a lot more popular out there, and farmers can irrigate in a variety of ways. Some farmers may have center pivots, but overhead irrigation system that travels in a circle and sprinkles water on top of the crop. Other farmers, where water supply might be more abundant, say in rivers and streams or whatever, might practice flood irrigation to where they roll out pipe, punch holes in the pipe, and it'll shoot a stream of water down every row or every other row. Now, in really arid environments where water is a much more limited resource, farmers have drip tape installed and will run irrigation water through that tape that will then leach out in the soil. Now, this method is very efficient. However, it can be very, very expensive to install and maintain. Sam Doberman asks, how's the trade war affecting farmers? Well, Sam, the trade war is affecting farmers in some ways. However, this isn't the first time that we've been through this. During President Trump's first term in office, he entered into a trade war with China, and this affected the farmers greatly then, because while America imports all sorts of goods in from China, about the only thing that China buys from the U.S. is our agricultural commodities. So the only way that China could retaliate against the U.S. was withdrawing from purchasing agricultural economies, and this led to a multi-year period where we experienced especially prices for our commodities. Towards the end of President Trump's first term, he was able to enter into a trade agreement with China in which China had guaranteed to purchase billions of more dollars of agricultural goods. However, after President Trump was voted out of office and President Biden was voted into office, China went back to doing, well, what China does, which is renege on a lot of different agreements. Now that President Trump is back in office, he's entered into another trade war, not only with China, but with a bunch of other different nations. In the near term, it is going to be painful, and we will suffer most likely depressed prices for could be an extended period of time. If President Trump is not able to get the trade deals that he wants, or the following administrations do not hold these countries to these trade deals, it's going to be just like it was the first round. We will have suffered for pretty much nothing. The American farmer produces about 16 billion bushels of corn every year. Of that, around 2.2 is exported to other countries. Exports plays a lot bigger role in soybeans. We produce around 4.5 billion bushels of soybeans every year. Of that, about 2.21 billion bushels is exported. About 85% of the 13 million bales of cotton that is produced in the U.S. every year is actually exported to other countries. So any potential cuts to these exports that I told you about could prove devastating to the American farmer for the short term. At Carol J. Hedges asks, why do weeds grow faster than crops? The crops that we grow have been bred over years and years and years for maximum production, not for survival. Our primary purpose in breeding crops is to produce a maximum amount of yield. That involves growing over a longer period of time, giving that plant a longer life cycle and the ability to capture more sunlight to be able to support that higher yield. Whereas the weeds that are present in our field have bred themselves through self-selection to survive. And one of the mechanisms that these weeds use to survive is to grow really, really quick so they can outcompete any other surrounding plants, produce their seed, and die, thus ensuring that that species of the weed will survive year after year after year. Akalaki 19 asks, so are GMOs bad? GMOs are perfectly safe. Now, GMOs actually came about the mid-1990s, where scientists were able to insert a Bt gene into some of our crops. And what this Bt gene is a toxin that is actually produced by bacteria called Bacillus thuringiensis. Now, this Bt toxin is completely harmless to animals and people. It has no effect on us at all. However, to the Lepidopteran pest or your caterpillar pest, it can be deadly. This particular ear sweet corn is a GMO. It was genetically modified to resist certain herbicides sprayed on the field. See, I have no problems myself either eating or consuming GMOs because they're perfectly safe. ESSA 618 asks, what is the biggest expense cost you have? Farming is an expensive game. There's no secret about that. But actually identifying the most expensive part of farming, well, it can kind of vary from farm to farm to farm. For me personally, our biggest line item expense is going to be our repair and maintenance costs. On average, every year I spend between $200,000 and $300,000 repairing and maintaining our equipment. Other farms might run the newest equipment. In that case, their biggest line item expense might be actually paying for that equipment. For example, a brand new large-size tractor is going to run you about $450,000. A brand new combine harvester is going to be approaching close to $1 million. A brand new cotton picker that we might only use 2 weeks out of every year is going to set you back about $1.2 million. So you can either spend a whole lot of money every year on equipment, not have to fix it as much, or you can run older equipment that doesn't cost as much, but you're going to pay to keep it repaired and maintained. At Arsenal Ultras asks, how do farmers get their goods to market, Genius? Well, Genius, we haul our crops to market. Farmers is the one industry that has to buy retail, sell wholesale, and pay the freight both ways. Some places we might haul our crops just a few miles down the road. Other times we might have to haul our crops 50 to 100 miles down the road, just depending on what area or location is paying the best for our crop. At Deborah Wright asks, what do you feel is the hardest part of farming? Farmers are the biggest gamblers out there because we're planting crops in the spring on faith and a prayer that things will go the way they need to go to produce a profitable crop all year long, with factors that we can't control ourselves, such as weather. But I've got to say, one of the most stressful things that I have to do on the farm is actually transporting equipment up and down the road. Our equipment has gotten tremendous in size. Our roads have stayed the same size. Our roads have also gotten busier due to urbanization encroaching on our farms. So transporting farm equipment in a safe manner down our busier public roads has actually become one of the more stressful things that we have to do. At Radmore Farm says, farmers do so much more than just make food. I only can think we're custodians of the countryside. What else do farmers do that you think people forget? Not only do we, grow the food and fiber that you eat, where we have to be agronomists, we have to be pathologists, we have to be mechanics, we might need to be electricians. There's just so many different aspects of the job that we need to have a very broad base of information in order to be successful as farmers. This next question comes from a farming subreddit. What is a day in the life of a farmer like? Well, one of the greatest benefits to being a farmer is that our life is definitely not boring. Our schedule is dictated by the seasons and, more importantly, by the weather. The past few weeks have been extremely busy because we're getting ready for planting. Myself and the crew that works with me, we've put in about 85 hours each week just to get our fields ready to plant. That's a lot longer than an 8 to 5 job, and it does not include weekends off. This latest question is from Jiggy. He asks, what do farmers do in the winter? Wintertime is one of the most important times on our farm because we are preparing for the next year. We plant in the spring all summer long and spend tending and maintaining the crops. We harvest in fall, so a lot of winter we're running our equipment through our shop and fixing anything that needs to be fixed, going through the finances, going through all of our data, determining what changes we need to make for next year, determining what seeds we need to buy, getting financing lined up for next year, going through training and classes to improve our operation, and so on. Karina F. Murray asks, how can we make farming more sustainable, economical, and environmentally friendly? Now, many farmers are some of the best environmentalists you will ever find out there because, well, our career, our livelihood depends on the state of the environment. However, that doesn't mean that there's not room for improvement. A lot of these companies we buy our chemicals and our inputs from, these companies' main goal, obviously, is to sell a product, so their research is really going to skew towards pushing more of a product instead of producing less of a product. The most reliable, consistent, independent research that is done is usually done at the university level by our land-grant universities. And in my opinion, there needs to be more funding to these land-grant universities to fund more research to determine whether we can, say, cut more fertilizer or cut more products to be more sustainable and more environmentally friendly. Big Dr. 007 asks, is it possible to switch to organic farming 100%? Yes, it is possible to switch to organic farming 100%. However, it's not necessarily easy to switch to organic farming 100%. I would have to almost completely change all of my agronomic practices. Now, this could potentially be rewarding because organic products at the store do bring a higher price than the conventionally grown products that I produce. In order to be certified organic, I must completely reject all of my conventional practices and use only organic practices for 3 consecutive years on a piece of ground before I can be certified organic. In that 3-year period, I can still grow products using organic methods. However, I cannot sell my products as organic products, and I'm receiving the price that conventional products bring. If you farm organically, you're going to have lower yields because you can't use a lot of the products that boost yields because they are considered to be supplied inorganically. I'm going to be very limited in my weed control, so I'm going to probably experience more competition from weeds reducing yields. I'm really going to be limited in my insect control. I would also be very limited in what types of fertilizers I'm able to use, mostly only being able to use manure as a fertilizer, which is not a bad fertilizer source. However, it is slower acting and takes longer to become plant available than what our inorganic fertilizers that we use are. So while it is possible to switch 100% to organic, you're looking at a 3-year window with lower yields and lower incomes until you can finally reap the benefits of farming organically. So those are all the questions for today. Thanks for watching Farming Support.
I think you're smarter than me, and that's what you got to realize, is that you're not special. That's what Aaron's getting at, is he's saying, yes, you are special, but you're not.
Perfect American accent in every role where you're playing an American. What is the most challenging word to say American?
There are a few. Honestly, the one that makes my heart sink when I see it in a script, surprisingly enough, is New York.
New York?
Yeah.
Really?
What, you can say it? I find it really, I'll reach a point where I go, Manhattan.
Is it a W with a Y? Is that what it is?
I don't know. Anything with an R in it is, you've got to pay attention.
Right.
But I can't do it now.
Yeah.
So what is Charles in a Big Apple on chance? It's going to be.
I say Big Apple.
Perfect American accent in every role where you're playing an American.
Thoughts on Duskblood being an 8-player PvPvE multiplayer game? I really don't love that, but I still have not been let down by FromSoft, and the trailer was very cool. I think Duskblood will run at 60. I think it's already been confirmed, right? I thought I read something about Duskblood being 60. I'm pretty sure by PvPvE they mean Duskblood is going to be like Elden Ring with co-op PvP. No, that is not what they mean. PvPvE is a real genre. Elden Ring just has a PvP option in it. Miyazaki was inspired by Tarkov like 2 to 3 years ago. This is 100% going to be some sort of extraction game. I don't see how you make this an extraction game. It's like leaving the area with loot. When it's revealed as an extraction game, you're going to feel the exact way you did earlier with the $100 GTA 6. Hey, that could be an extraction game. I'm just saying, I'm fine to see how. Let them experiment. It's better than making the same game 7 times. I'm fine with them experimenting. Historically, experimenting's gone very well for FromSoft. Like, they're experimenting by making a racing game. Don't really love racing games, but I'll try it. That's it. I've noticed over the last 10 or 11 months, I've been a lot happier. Glowing, really radiant. You can tell probably just from my voice alone and this striking smile. So what is the secret to this newfound happiness of mine? The one trick doctors don't want you to know? I haven't been online as much. I've been going outside far more frequently, spending time in the real world. And as such, I'm sure many of you have noticed over the last 10 or 11 months, internet drama hasn't been a huge focal point of the channel because I haven't seen a whole bunch of it. I haven't kept up with the vast majority of it. And of course, occasionally I've still dipped my tootsies in some of it, like if there's something particularly wacky going on, and I still cover like news and crazy shit going on with aliens and all of that kind of thing, or if there's like a really cringe, prankster that got arrested or something, I'll still talk about that. But it's not like a fixation for me like it used to be over the last few years where I was covering any and all internet creator space hoopla. And I want to keep it that way. I'm having a lot more fun not doing that. That being said, there is something that has unfolded here that's like the John Wick killing the dog moment that's bringing me back just very temporarily. And it's Pirate Software. Yesterday I talked about Stop Killing Games, and there's no way to talk about Stop Killing Games without also mentioning Pirate Software because of the profound effect he has had on that initiative in its demise. I say demise, but it's not actually fully cooked, but it has been on life support, and Pirate Software did play a big role in that because of 2 videos he made, as well as a stream, shitting all over it. And that's not even doing it justice. He was full-blown tooting on this. He was shitting on it with some fart on top. And a lot of what he was saying about Stop Killing Games wasn't accurate. It was a misrepresentation of the initiative. And the guy behind it, the guy spearheading it, Ross, finally set the record straight on a lot of the misconceptions that Pirate Software helped to put out there and kind of exacerbate these thought processes that just weren't accurate for what the initiative was actually aiming to do. He finally set the record straight. And I, of course, wanted to talk about it as someone who does actually care about it. Now, as I've said, I've been a little more off the grid. I bought a fucking farm, so I've been, living off the Lord's land recently, and I've missed a lot of the internet happenings. So, Pirate Software's previous anime arcs of drama, like with World of Warcraft, and the one after that, 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 I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to. I only got little tiddlywinks, little morsels of lore about it in a few clips, so I never really even understood what was going on there. So Pirate Software's response to everything that happened yesterday really caught me by surprise. That was a subversion of my expectation, bigger than Game of Thrones Season 8.
Yeah, Hutcher, I did. I think it's really hilarious to me that that entire community is so mad at me for putting out a video 10 months ago about their stuff, and then not being refuted, and now it's my fault that everything is going wrong for them.
I cannot believe his ego. His ego is so out of control, I feel like he's only a week or 2 away from exclusively referring to himself in third person, like Stone Cold fucking Steve Austin. And that's the truth, because Pirate Software said so. Some shit like that. It's crazy how he's responded. The smugness is nails on a chalkboard. It just makes you feel icky listening to it. And he goes on that same talking point multiple times in the clip about how, like, oh, I guess I'm fully to blame. I guess because I made those videos 10 months ago, it's my fault entirely that this whole thing crashed and burned. Yep. Oh boy. Time to play a sad song on the world's smallest violin for the Stop Killing Games movement. All because Big Bad Pirate Software took it all down by himself. Like, it's crazy. No one's saying that. Like, there is no one out there that is saying it is entirely Pirate Software's fault that Stop Killing Games hasn't been more successful in its endeavors. But there is irrefutable evidence that you had a detrimental effect, a majorly damaging effect on Stop Killing Games because of your disinformation that you spread about it in 2 videos and across all your streams, and not once have you bothered to correct that record. And he has said that it hasn't been refuted in 10 months. That is fish bait. That is turbo horseradish. Go to your own comment section on your videos to see everyone refuting you, as well as the innumerable other gamers and voices out there that have taken down those talking points and debunked a lot of them and proven that you just didn't understand. And that is the big problem. No one hates Pirate Software because he doesn't agree with Stop Killing Games. The reason so many people are angry at him, myself included here, you can disagree with the movement all you want. If you don't like the initiative, I'm not your fucking dad. You make your own choices there. But the reason so many people, myself included, do not like how Pirate Software is handling all this is he is outright refusing to just admit any level of fault, that he was wrong about anything. And that couldn't be more clear from these clips, as well as his tweets that he's made. It's actually his tweets that really send me off the fucking rails here, off my board. Let's start with this little nugget here that he deleted from last night. So he tweeted directly at Ross, the guy behind Stop Killing Games, talking about how he made those videos 10 months ago, and since then, his community's been nothing but hateful. Scourge. A fucking tyrannid threat that he must destroy. Your community is fucking rabid, and it's shit to deal with for anyone on the other side of the argument. Why do you think I haven't talked about this shit in 10 months? Why do you think we auto-mute anyone bringing it up in chat? Because it's been rage bait and shit-flinging the entire time. It just goes on about, like, how he is the victim of Ross's toxic, terrible community, which is hilariously hypocritical coming from Pirate Software, when in his videos and his streams, he makes it very clear.
And this is horrible, I hate this. Everything else about this, I despise with passion. This is so bad.
This is so bad. Okay, there are some things wrong with this. Hi, I'm Anna Cogman Martin. I am an ancient historian, and today I'm going to be looking at AI-generated images of ancient Roman life. Instead. Okay, and then Okay. So, I think here we are in the atrium of a pretty luxurious Roman villa. You can tell that because it's the main room, we've got some columns, we've got the kind of characteristic hole in the roof that you find in the that breaks the lighting. We've got some vaguely Roman, horrifying things. We've got some immediately decoration rooms. The guest structure is not horrifying. It is this large, central rectangular room. This will be the main reception room of the Roman house. There is this sunken area and that corresponds to a different area of the kitchen. Around that is a covered area, which here has some columns to decorate it. That's nice. That sometimes happened. There are also some elements of decoration here that are right. So we've got the walls decorated with wall paintings, which is very accurate. The content of the wall paintings, not so much. We'll get into that. And the floor is decorated with what looks like marble, which again is something that you certainly would find in Roman houses, and particularly this kind of multicolored use of marble is very characteristic of Rome, particularly from the sort of early imperial period onwards. These coloured marbles come from all across the empire and are very expensive, so having lots of different colours of marble on show in the floor of your house demonstrates your wealth, but also the fact that you are part of this society that rules over the entire world and can use its resources to decorate their homes. In terms of what this gets less right, the size of the whole issue is bigger than I'm used to seeing in atria. The fact that we get this kind of sunken area in most of the is also not something that is generally encouraged. Bowl-like bar thing in the centre of the room, which there's some things, I suppose, that we find in Pompeii. We sometimes see on tripods that are found in the future. But really what we expect to see in the centre of the room is smaller sunken which directly corresponds to the image and which catches the range of so when we look at wall decoration, there are some things about this with the AI that often involve very tight. So first is the fact that the surface of the room is parts and by decorative borders. That is something that we see in a lot of styles, especially particularly, for example, the old style is very characteristic of that. The rest of the decoration, however, looks to be deeply Renaissance. This kind of big, fragile figure that you see by the door, the fact that it's stayed out 50 of that. It gets into large-scale figurative paintings or walls, but then they are generally part of a larger narrative, for example, the modern. Other good things about this wall decoration are colour and everything. It's perfectly colourful, even the sort of pale marble statues today would have been painted in bright colours. I also like the fact that they have this fake painted on columns. This was something the Romans were very keen on. They loved kind of painting on fake architectural elements to sort of trick the eye. So we'd have columns, we would have kind of perspective down colonnades that didn't exist. Another thing that I'm really struck by is how much foliage we've got going on. And in a way, this is right, and in a way, it's so wrong. I can't really imagine the Romans having ivy trained up their colonnades within the atrium, but the garden was a big part of the atrium because most Roman atriums opened out, sometimes with a kind of office space between, onto a Paris-style garden. So a garden that is surrounded by food. So there is, in the Roman atrium, this sense of the kind of natural world coming inside, perhaps not quite so literally as we find it in this image. Okay, so that's the next one. Okay, so we're in a bar. There seem to be modern pool ladders. All of them. Not sure about that. This is not. Okay, so what we've got going on is we have a correlated room with a bath. It looks like a good hot bath. Like the steam rising off it. And some painted decorations on the walls with decorative, again, colored marble columns, and we've got a group of men bathing. Things that it gets right: the general shape of the room, the fact that the baths were heated, and it's probably accurate that we do see kind of a group of men. It seems that in the bigger bathhouses there were separate bathing spaces for men and for women. In the smaller bathhouses, maybe they were used at different times. And people did bathe together. Bathing was seen as a very social activity at times, as with friends, as having means. They probably wasn't naked though. I'm not sure what's going on with this sort of strange belt that this man over here is wearing. The other thing that strikes me about this, apart from the horror of the pool ladder, is the decoration. So we've got this painted frieze at the top, but the decoration here is very messy, and I think AI has really clearly taken this from sort of surviving archaeological remains and then stuck a roof on it. In reality, bathhouses would generally be incredibly beautifully and intricately decorated. Every one of these surfaces would be painted or covered in marble if you were in one bigger, wealthier baths in the city itself. I suspect that to make this image, AI mainly used surviving archaeological sites. And the reason I think that is because we're really good on the columns. Aspects of the decoration have the story on top of these. And I think it's places where archaeological sites have been covered with temporary roofs. And that's why the walls are so much more exposed and the decoration is so much patchier than we would expect to see in sort of proper reconstruction. Okay. Okay, we're in the Palestra. Things seem to be going badly, or well. I'm not entirely sure what game they're meant to play. Maybe some form of very violent pool game. We do know that the Romans played pool games. There is a pool game that is recorded called Top Hunter, which does seem to be violent. I don't entirely sure large boulders. I would say, I'm trying to tell something accurate. I guess the general structure of having a shaded colonnade surrounding a slightly more open area is what we do see in exercise grounds in the ancient world. It means that you can do your exercise out in the open and then you can come and cool off, relax in the shaded colonnade. I think it's also right that men would be wearing potentially something like this to exercise. The Greek tradition of always exercising naked doesn't necessarily catch on quite so much in the Roman world. I also like the fact that this is really, a group activity. Men would go to the baths and then they would go to exercise grounds and very often attached to them, and this would be part of their social life as much as of their sort of bodily care. I wonder about
Yo.
Taco.
What's going on?
Not too much. Just got back from work. The girls are out to bingo, so
I'll play the finals.
I am down to clown. Play some finals finally.
Alright. All right, you want to be on Discord then?
Yeah.
All right, I'll see you in like literally 2 minutes.
All right.